All right, everybody. Again, welcome to Writing College Essays That Wow. My name is Justin Taylor, and I am a college admissions expert. I have been working as an admissions coach for many, many, many years and have learned a lot about what makes essays really, really sing, really, really change the game for an applicant, both for good and for ill. I've seen both things happen. I come from the world of writing. I have an MFA in writing from Yale, and my mother also worked in college admissions. And so I learned a lot that way, as well as through many different admissions consultancies before starting off on my own. Um, so let's jump on in. So you just heard about me. I'll leave that picture up so you can get a better look at me. Uh, there's me in front of the Thayer Gates at Brown, where I have a few students this year. Let's get into the agenda. So the first thing I want to do is talk about who admissions officers are. And if you've seen another webinar from me before, this is something I always talk about because there's a big myth about what happens in admissions and who these mythological authorities are, and they're real people, and how they think is maybe not what you would expect. So we're going to go over that before we jump into what kinds of essays really work in an admissions process. Then we're going to look at the qualities schools look for in an application and basically in an applicant. There are certain things that your transcript and your grades are going to communicate about your qualities, but mostly it's this essay. This essay is going to do a lot to communicate these qualities that top schools look for. We're going to look at the ingredients to a WOW essay. We're going to look at what you can do in this session, in this webinar right now, to start preparing for that, start getting down some details. We'll look at two different essay types or structures that have worked over and over and over. So you can walk away from this webinar able to do those. You will be able to even brainstorm and structure an outline for your first draft within this hour. If that's not you, if you need a little more space, that's totally okay. You can watch the recording later. Take your time. If you're watching the recording now, you can hit pause when it comes time for that exercise. And then, of course, questions. So if you have questions, I'm here for you within the hour to answer them. All right, so let's get going. So like I was saying, we're going to look at who admissions officers are and how they think. So we're going to start with this guy named David. He was an admissions officer at Cornell. He's no longer there. But when he was there, this is what he said. One year, I had a student with near perfect SAT scores and straight A's. I'd originally put him in the submitted pile, but then we had to reduce the list. So this is the way all admissions offices work. It is a humongous pile of very qualified students, and they have to reduce the list. How do they do this? So this next half of this quote kind of explains. I reread his essays, and frankly, they were just a little more boring than the other kids, so I cut him. Boring was the only justification that I needed, and he was out. So I don't want to scare anybody here who thinks they might be that boring person. No one is boring. No one is. Everyone is unique. Everyone can hold someone's attention and is worthy of it. And we're going to learn a little bit about how to do that today. This one student who had straight A's and a great SAT wasn't able to do that in his writing. He might be an actually really cool, curious, unique human being, but his application didn't reflect that. So we're gonna empower you guys so that doesn't happen to you. This next quote I think really summarizes the mentality. So this woman read applications for Yale as well as MIT. She says some 70% of the kids who apply are qualified to come to school here. So that's sort of what David was saying too, right? Everyone's got these incredible transcripts, these great test scores, and we only have space for 1 in 10. We can be as choosy as we like. It almost always comes down to whether or not you're a likable person. An admissions officer is really asking herself, would I like to hang out with this guy or gal for the next 4 years? Would I like to hang out with this person? So she used the word likable. I'm not a huge fan of this word. Um, admissions is actually not a popularity contest. It is about who in this pile, who in this group of students could I really sit down and have a rich conversation with? Who would I love to pick their brain and ask them a question and hear what they have to say? Who could I like take to Starbucks basically and like really enjoy getting to know and how they think, or maybe debate them on a topic. This is the kind of profile they're looking for. An engaging thinker, a person who's going to be a part of their community as a young scholar citizen. And I'm going to get into this idea of the citizen scholar because it is pretty key to admissions. So the next thing I want to share with us is about the place of character, just in general. um, for top tier schools, they, like I said, get applicants who are mostly the same when it comes to their academics. By the time they're opening up the application and reading everything, they're dealing with students who have very strong profiles in terms of the data, in terms of the quantitative side of their application, right? Their academics, their tests are very high level, very strong, but that is not enough to differentiate a student at a top tier school. So they look to the character side, which is your essays, your activities, your rec letters, and maybe some extra things you share, like a portfolio. If you are interested in understanding how portfolios work, um, you can check out some of my other webinars where I go into more of the details of the rest of the application, including in 2 weeks, I'm going to be giving the webinar for the supplements and other essays that round out the application. So if you want to know more about that side, absolutely stick with me in 2 weeks. We'll get all of that covered. So I'm rushing through this stuff, some of it's review maybe for you, because I really do want to get to the essay. However, it is important that we all have a shared understanding of how these schools operate, what they're looking for. So there are 6 qualities that I find are common to these schools, the 6 qualities that I think they're looking for in an applicant. So the first thing is, of course, intellectual curiosity. Is this student driven to learn? Because you're applying to be a student. That's the job you're applying for when you're applying to university, right? Is this student driven to learn? Do they have an intrinsic motivation to go out and seek new experiences, learn new things, grow their mind? Do they want to contribute to a culture of intellectual curiosity? Are they going to help motivate others to do the same thing? So that's a big piece, right? Are they already in a scholar mode, right? The next thing to look for is drive. So not just intellectual curiosity drive, but just a drive to accomplish, to uh, make an impact. And we'll get into some of those details and other points. Is there a sense that this student has another word they often use is grit. Grit meaning and sort of inner resources, inner strength to face a challenge when things aren't just handed to a student and they have to work a little harder or negotiate, create partnerships. For example, reaching out to professors to make mentors or get support for a project. That takes grit. And as we've seen in a lot of college campuses these days, there can be a lot of upheaval. There was COVID and the whole switch to online learning those years. There's been political upheaval on some campuses, and they want students that have the grit and adaptability to work with these kinds of waves of change. The other is self-motivated. So they have a sense of their drive to learn, they're adaptable, they have inner resources, inner grit, and they're already clear in themselves what it is they're there to do. It doesn't have to necessarily be, I have a 10-point plan for what I'm going to do in college, but they have a sense of what they're curious about, where they want to spend their time at the university, what kinds of experiences they're leaning into, and the kinds of changes they want to see in themselves before they leave. So they do not want usually students that need hand-holding. So students that need to be guided through the university process at every stage. Of course, there's a lot of support in universities. It's not just like students are left on their own. But students who are self-motivated are less of a burden on the school, frankly. And they end up becoming the kinds of alumni schools really like to cultivate because they make a great name for the school and might even help do some good fundraising if they love the brand, if you will. They feel like loyal alumni. So another point is a strong sense of a point of view. So one thing that I think a lot of students don't understand about what admissions offices are looking for is they are curating like a community of citizens. And in that community of citizens, they want diverse discourse. They want um, they want to make sure that there's a debate, essentially, because that leads to this ideal of democracy. Most universities are trying to create an ideal democracy. And so they look for students of many different kinds of backgrounds to create um, a heterogeneous culture. And so sharing a unique point of view is something really important to do in the essay. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. I mentioned a little bit before, they look for a desire to make an impact. So there's a sense that the student has a feeling of a legacy they want to leave in their life and to contribute. And that usually means, when they see that in the student, that usually means this is someone who's going to give on campus, who's going to create opportunities not just for themselves, but for other students too, and might be a great leader. So the desire for impact is something that they really prize. And the last thing I would add to this list is an ethical regard. So sometimes they call that the ethical student, or the civic student. There is a sense of emotional intelligence inside of the student. There's a sense that they have a feeling for what is right and wrong, and a sense of morality. And so they look to that because, again, they're trying to create a community that is not just diverse and rich, but also in which there can be an emotional care, a sense of I am a part of this community. I am equal with these others here, and so that ethical regard keeps a student up, following certain standards, if you will. So you might call that maturity, or they might have called that maturity in another era of admissions, but these days they call it ethics or ethical regard. I like to break down the approach to the essay very, very briefly with this WOW acronym. I'm going to give this to you because it's what I named my company after, and I believe in it so much that I use it in the name. But also, it's a really cool way to very simply and quickly remember sort of the task of the application itself and what it needs to do. So the first thing is the want. So we talked about that earlier: self-motivated, a drive, intellectual curiosity. they really look for students who have a sense of passion. What what would get them up at 4 a.m. or stay up till 4 a.m. to learn or do? Um, you might even start right now making a list. It doesn't have to be academic, actually. There's more than just academics that universities are interested in supporting. So uh, make a list. And then the second thing, the O in WOW, is about your original voice. That's about the point of view piece, right? They look for admissions offices look for people that speak with their own voice, and it stands out. It's unique. So the best way I have found for a writer, for an applicant to speak with their own voice is to tell their own story, is to tell original stories, stories unique to you, original to you, that are really from your life. And in the process of telling a story from your own life, your own point of view comes across. It's a natural thing. We can break that apart and look at the mechanics of it, but it naturally starts to happen. And 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 so in everything I do with my students that I work with personally, that is the number one pursuit when we get started writing, and that's what we're going to do today. The last piece of the wow is wisdom. It's important that an application share some, especially the essay, shares some kernels of knowledge, wisdom that you have learned about yourself, or if you want, about life, uh, in the essay, in the story that you're telling. And you want to make a list of these little kernels and weave those into your essays and across the application. So, one other way to break this down is what I call the three passions. So if you look at this interesting Venn diagram I've made, there's three passions, I think, that or three buckets, if you will, that all our passions can go into. There's an academic or intellectual passion, favorite subjects in school, uh, and for college. There's a civic passion, which is your impact, the passion you have for making change in the world. And then a heart passion, something that you personally love. So when you're choosing an academic passion for this uh, profile, for your profile, it's really important to be as specific and niche as possible, especially with top tier schools. I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but just so you know, it's not enough just to say I want to study business. You got to get more specific than that. The more specific you get, the easier it is for schools to see you and say yes to you, as long as your resume and your transcript and your activities back it up. For the civic passion, think of a big, hairy problem you want to impact with your degree or with whatever you're going to learn in university. And see if you can be about that in your application, especially if there's strong evidence in your resume for tackling that big, hairy problem already. And then the third one is an activity that just fills you up and lights you up. That could be an artistic passion, piano, music. It could be a sport. It could be really rich conversations with your favorite family members or your friends. It doesn't necessarily need to be something uh, earth-changing, right? But where these things overlap, that is your wow. That's what I call your wow, because it is the unique set of passions that no other student has that you want to make the center of your application, and sometimes the center of your essay. We'll talk about that. You want to make sure your application reinforces these things so that these passions overlap, and again, there is this reinforced image of you having these unique uh, overlapping passions. So let's now get into some essay types. So the first thing I want to say about essay types is there are many, many, many out there. And I don't want to say that these two I'm about to share with you are the only ones. They are two of the most common, I would say, and the two of the most maybe understandable and easy to grab in a short lesson like this. But it's not a problem if you choose a structure that is slightly different from what I'm about to share with you. Okay, these are just some of the most easy to do and most successful, I find. So the first one is often called the challenge essay. It is structured on the hero's journey, which is an important journey of change, a journey of learning that changed you. And this is excellent for showing character, especially when it comes to some of the elements that they look for that are beyond the intellectual. So resourcefulness, grit, empathy, as well as a desire to grow and learn. This is an essay structure or type that is really good for strong storytellers. So if you love telling a joke, if you love telling a story, this could be a great fit for you. Or if you have a really strong sense of what you want to study or do in college. This is also sometimes called the origin story essay. If you have a strong sense of what you want to study in college and you have a really strong experience of pursuing that in high school, especially if you have a really strong civic engagement, big hairy problem that you are tackling already, it might make a really good sense to use the challenge essay structure to talk about this big passion of yours and a story within that passion of yours to that could share this journey of learning. That could be a structure for this journey of learning we're going to look at right now. I'll leave it at that for now. If you are a less experienced writer, this is also an essay structure that's really familiar to all of us because it is essentially the structure of a lot of movies and books you've read. It is maybe the most common story structure out there. So it's in our bones. And so for those of us who are newer to writing, less experienced with writing, this might be a great fit. So this is an example of one such essay. I'm not going to read this whole thing for you just because I want to save some time for us to get to the creative writing of your essay. But essentially in this essay, this writer, Tadeo, talks about fitting in using his car, his truck, as a metaphor for that. And I will be sharing a link in the follow-up email to this essay so you can read it. But just so you have an eye on this now, you can maybe scan some of this page, this screen, take a look at what's down on the page. It's a very humorous essay as well. I love some humor in an essay, and so do colleges. So let's break down Tadeo's essay before we get to working on this kind of structure ourselves. So what's his passion in this essay? On the surface, it's his truck. So he writes an ode to his truck, basically, in this essay. And this truck is big. It is not a flashy car like the cars of his classmates. And he sticks out for it. And he finds really challenged by not fitting in. He's also a student who has a Hispanic background, and he goes to a school where that stands out. and he has a funny name. And so he has to learn to accept this. And his experience of owning Betsy is a way he gets through that shyness. So it's got 4 parts, and these are the 4 parts of a hero's journey. There's the status quo. Tadeo loves his truck. They accomplish a lot together and care for each other. He has a hauling business, for example. The challenge comes when his peers make fun of his truck, and Tadeo has to face his shyness and get stronger. So you have a status quo, then you have the challenge that comes and knocks the status quo out of balance. Then the trial and error. This is the period where the hero struggles to bring balance back. So he runs his hauling business, he fixes Betsy up, and that builds his confidence. He stops worrying so much about what other people think, because this truck is giving him a sense of accomplishment and independence. And at the end, a new world, or really for your sake, I would say a new you. Betsy becomes a kind of school mascot, a school celebrity, because everyone learns the name of the truck and it stands out. And Tadeo starts to take on leadership roles at his school in student government, and the end. So what would you do if you were starting your own challenge essay? You want to identify a passion, and then make a list of stories in which you struggled to pursue it. So struggle is the key here. Stories aren't remembered. I'll say it that way. Stories aren't remembered so much when there's no struggle. If today's story was, I went to high school, ran for vice president and won, no one would care. But instead, I went to high school, I had a funny name, I was Hispanic, I had this weird truck, everyone made fun of me. Then I went on this journey of building my confidence, and then suddenly I'm school vice president. It's a very different story, much more memorable. So think about this stories where you struggle. Then you want to break it down into these 4 parts. You could even think of 4 images. Some minds work best in images. That's beautiful. If you love graphic novels, you would definitely be someone who loves to think in images. So first, status quo, life before you met this challenge, in which you're pursuing something you love, but there's a struggle, and there's a challenge causing a struggle. Then that challenge arrives, right? And forces you to change. You have to try different things to meet that challenge. This is the trial and error. And at last you succeed, you become someone new, a new world is made, a new person is made, and this is the great person the schools are considering. So one of the cool things about a challenge essay is that by the end, the school has a sense of the strengthened person, the stronger person that they are now admitting. So make sure when you write a challenge essay, you spend at least a quarter, maybe a third of the essay on the person who is now remade by that challenge, and not just on the struggle and the trial and error. Then think about the theme of the growth that you go through in the essay, and make a list of questions and insights and observations about the theme. For today, it was confidence, embracing his uniqueness, and getting confidence from that. When you identify a theme, you want to make a list of questions, insights, observations about it that you can weave through your essay. So you have a 4-part structure and then some reflection pieces to weave through the essay. All right. I imagine some pens might be flying. I have to keep moving. We're going to now look at the patchwork essay. So this one is maybe not quite as common as a challenge essay. However, it's very popular and it's very, very successful. Many of my students use this structure. I would say the majority of my students that I work with use this structure. So this is an associative structure. So rather than a story that is chronological, that you move through from beginning to end, it's an essay that is organized with associations or maybe riffs on a favorite place, a favorite object, a ritual that moves the essay forward. So let me zoom into this so we can understand this. The favorite place or object or ritual is what you would call a framing device. So this is a literary term here, a framing device or topic of discussion. You could even think of it that way, that the writer returns to again and again as they riff. So there is a very strong coherent theme that runs through everything. This is really great for students who want to show their capacity for thinking. This is really an amazing structure for showing off high-level thinking, deep thinking, which is critical for students who are going to be applying with more than one discipline in their application. So if you know you're going to be applying to schools with a mix of like a STEM concentration and something humanities, you definitely want to be using a patchwork structure or something social science and something humanities. You definitely are going, or arts, you're going to want to show your capacity to think across disparate things. And so a patchwork structure where you're bringing together disparate things is going to really put that on display. This is also really great for writers that have some experience and have a sense of some craft. This is a somewhat trickier structure. So for writers that are less confident, less experienced, I would say the patchwork structure, probably don't worry about it. Stick with a challenge essay. It's also a winner. All right, so let's look at an example just so you know what's going on here. An example I think will make this clear. So this is a very, very famous essay from this woman, Brittany Stinson, where she wrote about shopping at Costco. So Costco was her framing device, and she has a brilliant voice. She has a lot of humor in her voice, and she basically shares her love of shopping at Costco and all of the things that it makes her think about. And the essay is structured with all of her trips to Costco from her childhood to where she is now as a young adult, or I guess it was. This essay is probably 10 years old now. Here's one line: overcome with wonder, I wanted to touch and taste, to stick my head into industrial-sized freezers to explore every crevice. I was a conquistador, but rather than searching for the land of El Dorado, I scoured aisles for free samples. Before inevitably being whisked away into a shopping cart, I scaled a mountain of plush toys and surveyed the expanse that lay before me, the kingdom of Costco. So this is, of course, her childhood experience. It's intentionally like overwritten, overdone to bring out the humor, but there's so much intelligence in it too. And the writing is really top notch. I'm not going to read this whole thing as I did for the other one, just so we don't take up too much time. I will also send the link to this one in the follow-up email so you can put your eyes on this. Really worth studying. What she does in this essay is amazing. And as you can see here, she gets into almost every single top school. She gets into every single Ivy League school plus Stanford in her admissions. It's extraordinary. And it's because this essay was so excellent at doing this patchwork structure. So let's talk about the elements of this. So as I mentioned, her framing device is shopping at Costco and her many trips from childhood to today. And the theme that's running through it is insatiable curiosity, the intense desire to know. So I read that brief quote from the essay about climbing the plushy the mountain of plushy toys and sticking her head in freezers and being like a curious George all over the place inside of Costco. And so the associations are always about this desire to understand and to know. So, for example, as a child, it's the scale of Costco that inspires her, how big everything is. And it brings out this love of questions. It's like, oh my gosh, there's so much about this world that is intriguing and fascinating, and I want to know all about it now. And then as a teenager, the questions become more sophisticated. So she questions things like the physics of a cart that's overloaded with stuff and loses its chopper and is sent careening down a ramp. What is the velocity of that cart? She talks about US history. She comes across a hickory smoked ham and wonders if Old Hickory, the nickname for Andrew Jackson, would approve. And the controversy around that presidency gets some questioning in the essay. So as you can see, she jumps around from thing to thing to thing, but it's always inside the container of shopping at Costco. How can you do this? So first you want to identify that place, object, ritual that you love, and then make a list of all your stories about it. Again, story is key. And then pick one to use as a frame. It could be as simple as a moment. I've had students make great patchwork essays about one moment, one little postage stamp of time. For example, I have a student who made an extraordinary essay about playing a Chopin piece, and the different movements of the Chopin piece at the piano moved him to think about different things he was really loving to study. He was also interdisciplinary. He got into a lot of great schools this year. And you come back again and again to this moment, this frame. Could be, again, the place, the ritual, the object, as you discuss the theme. So again, this theme is consistent through the entire essay. You don't change the theme. You want to stick with it, right? You don't ask questions about things that are outside the theme. So you want to identify it, your relationship with this place or object or ritual. And then, like before, make a list of questions, insights, observations about that theme. And these become the meat of your essay. Whereas with the challenge essay, they're more like the seasoning. In a patchwork essay, they are the meat. They are the real substance of it. So this list has to be deep. And then again, at each step in the framing story, associate to the different stories and thematic questions and insights from your lists, and then come right back. So the way Brittany does it is she shops at Costco. She sees something that makes her think of a question, physics, history, etc., but she comes right back to shopping. You can do this too. It takes a little more finesse to outline this. However, it can result in an extraordinary personal essay. All right. The next thing that you can do to get started is my college essay starter. So I am going to move this aside so you can get a better look at it. All right. The college essay starter is an exercise I invented to help students identify details about themselves that are really, really unique that no one else can say. And I have this, free on my website if you want to use it. It's an extremely useful tool. It's not only useful for the essay, it's useful for all the supplements, for the additional info statement. This exercise becomes a source of so much content for the entire application. I highly recommend using it. It has 10 lists in it. Your top 10 passions that you get out of bed at 4 a.m. to do. Top 10 daily rituals or routines, or weekly or monthly or annual. Things you do to connect to yourself. Things you do to relax. And then top 10 people or situations that challenged you. And then lastly, top 10 favorite places or objects. Get to 10 in each of these, because the deeper you get, the further you go, the more unique your entries become, because you're really having to stretch. All right, so how do you choose what the topic should be? How do we go about this? Because it's so critical, right? It's fine to have a great structure, but if the substance inside of that structure is very common, it doesn't matter how good the structure is. So choosing an essay topic is an art. And there's a few key things I want to share about this. The first is the weirder the topic or the nerdier the topic, the more it lingers in the mind of the reader. I read this fantastic essay about a kid who's now at Stanford who was afraid of birds. He was a STEM applicant, didn't write at all about STEM, didn't need to, had a great application. He wanted to share his character, and he had this weird fear of birds, and he wanted to get over it. And so he wrote an essay about how one day he went to a park and covered himself in bird seed and let pigeons come and eat off of his body, and got over his fear of birds, and talked about getting over fears, through exposing oneself to those things and taking the teeth out of them. Such a memorable essay. Everyone remembers the kid who covered himself in birdseed. Everyone. So weirder, nerdier, definitely go for it. There are some things I would say don't work so well because they're very, very, very common. So there's the 3Ds: death, divorce, depression. The reason I encourage students to avoid these topics is A, they're talked about a lot. And it's very difficult for young people to have a point of view on these experiences, as impactful as they are, in a way that is unique. And, these essays are being read by people with much more life experience, and they look for more sophistication in the point of view. So that's why I say to avoid these topics. Another one is the big game. So that could be the sports game, that could be the chess championship, that could be the science Olympiad. These are very, very common in the personal essay. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. There's a zillion trillion essays that start with like, my palms were sweaty and my breath was quickening as I blah 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 was getting ready for the pitch, or I was checkmated at the chess tournament. All of that's super, super common. So I ask you to just put it aside if that's you. And the last, service trips and vacations tend to not be great because these are usually organized by adults, not by the student. And you want to talk about experiences that you organize that show your self-motivation. So things that adults put together, I would say steer clear of. Sometimes students have organized their own service trips, and I would say that's a different story, but usually not the best. And they're also very, very, very common. You want to get advice on this. So when you're choosing your essay topic, don't go it alone. You need a team. So reach out to your school counselor, reach out to folks that know more about admissions, frankly. So maybe your English teacher, your school counselor. You can also ask me. Like I said earlier, if you want to talk to me, I give a free 30 minutes to anybody and everybody. No questions asked at all. I can go over your topic with you and give you my points of view on it. The other point I like to make about this is I don't use the Common App prompts to generate essays. because I don't find they stir writing very well. I don't find they bring up strong writing. You can use a challenge essay structure or a Patrick essay structure, and then at the end of writing your essay, go through the Common App prompts and choose which one is the best fit. So that's how I do it. Like I mentioned earlier, discovering your passion. If you are very clear on what you're going to do in college and you have a very strong track record in your resume of making an impact, like you started your own business or a nonprofit or a very impactful school club that no one else has created before. You know, I like to say, ride in on your horse, ride into that school on your horse. And so the story of discovering that passion or a challenge within that passion can make a really great essay topic. And then the patchwork essay is, of course, great for those students doing things that want to show off interdisciplinary thinking. So I always share this with every webinar. It's one of my favorite ways to sort of break down how college admissions can be shifted. Most people come to me and this is what they feel, that they are like the bachelors on the Bachelorette show, and there's only one bachelorette and she gets to hand out one rose and everyone's waiting to be that person who gets picked. Pick me, pick me, pick me. When we go through this essay writing process and we really do it right, it's actually more like this. You feel like the person who gets to choose the college. There's this feeling of, I've really communicated my strengths. I really communicated what's awesome about me and why I'm so worthy of being at said schools. And so when you're sending out your applications, that's what it ought to feel like. Lucky them. And then when it comes to this, the steps to getting to the submittable essay, of course, you want to always outline the first draft before you get writing. I'm not a fan of just free writing your essay to perfection. Really strong essays take an outline, so start there. I threw down some exercises for you to get started creating content that you can then put into an outline. Then you want to write your first draft based on that outline. Do not set the bar high for your first draft, folks. If you want to like have a first draft that's full of like all of those story beats and those kernels of wisdom woven in and that wonderful voice ringing through, you're going to get writer's block. Don't do it. Just get the bones down in your first draft. And with each subsequent draft, cut away the fat and add those elements that enrich the essay that I've identified earlier. Those thematic questions and insights, for example, weave those in. Then once you've gotten to a point where your essay has all that you think it needs, then you want to polish and trim. The Common App essay is 650 words max. So there's often a strong trimming process. I recommend that you get an adult to do the final trim and polish on your essay. It is a very big skill. It takes a lot of practice. It takes some years to really develop the skill to polish and trim strong writing. So work with an adult when you get to that phase. In fact, I would say work with an adult through all the phases. But if you don't have the chance to do that, that's okay. Definitely when you polish and trim, have an adult do that with you. And then when you have that, share the essay with as many people as you can whose opinion you respect. Don't just share it with every cousin you have. Share with people whose opinion you think is informed, meaning they have an insight into college admissions. Let their feedback send you back to the essay to do some rewrites and then polish and trim again. That is very, very common for the best essays, right? It takes a village. And then at the end, assign a prompt. Go back through the Common App list of prompts. And there's even the 8th prompt, which is write your own prompt. And if all else fails, you can always use that. Get started now. The summer is the best time to write your college essay, because in the fall, you're a senior, you are busy, busy, busy applying to schools, maybe even visiting schools some more, retaking the SAT, trying to ace all of your APs or your high-level courses. It is really difficult to get a really strong essay out in the fall. People do it, and I've helped many people do it. However, I find that the summer, when there's a little more space, is a really great time to do it, because you can do that multi-step process where they have many drafts when there's more time and you can really breathe. And just before we get to questions, here's a few things that I do with people. Obviously, there's a free essay starter. And if you want, we can consult on your topic together. I give a free 30 minutes to everybody, no questions asked. I do have one-on-one essay coaching programs. I do not just the main essay, I do the entire application from A to Z. I also help students do school searching, list building, school outreach. And if you're a junior, if you're a rising junior, I also help students do boosting extracurriculars in the resume. So if you're looking to create more experiences, independent experiences, that WOW project, for example, I help students do that as well. However, I'm also most well known for the essays and creating the strongest applications possible. And for everybody who's attending this webinar, I have an unlimited, I have a discount, off of unlimited packages for the rest of July. Well, any package, not just unlimited. Any of my packages, 10% off until the rest, through the rest of July. All right. So now let's get to your questions. All right. So I see we have something in the Q&A. Somebody asked me, is bullying related experience and how it impacted or changed the student personally a no as an essay topic? That's a very cool question. You know, bullying is a very powerful, challenging experience. And I would say it's not necessarily a no. The way to deal with a hardship. So the way I would answer this question is how to write a hardship essay. And a hardship essay is slightly different than a challenge essay. A challenge essay is perhaps not about the most life-changing, challenging experience you've ever had. But a hardship essay is about something that really, really impacted you, that may have impacted your grades, or the foundations of your well-being. And bullying might do that. So when it comes to these kinds of essays, you definitely want to work with an experienced person to massage the topic. And I recommend that you spend no more than 1/3 of the essay, describing the hardship. So if you want to mention bullying or use bullying as a topic, I would say do it only if you can keep it to the first third of your essay. The second 2/3 should be about the healing and the impact around the student afterwards? What the student's doing afterwards, after they're healed? What are they doing to make things better for themselves and maybe even others? So go from hurting to healing to helping. It's really key to put emphasis on those other two, especially the helping, if there's a lot to say there. And then how has that changed you, the student? How has that changed the student at the end? So definitely give it a shot. Email me, reach out to me if you want more specific advice on your specific case. But the answer is it's not a no as an essay topic. As long as, again, you're focusing more on the person who has resurrected after. That's most important, because that's who the school is admitting or trying to admit. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that for now. So I see I have another question in the Q&A. This is a little bit long. I'm going to read this very, very quickly. Okay, this person's got their application mostly written, but they're worried about the essays being a little bland or straightforward. Oh yes, this is a hardship story actually that she's also dealing with. So my answer that I just gave is somewhat helpful. So this person's hardship has to do with divorce, and so they're wondering if they should skip it because it's a common topic. And they're also sharing that this hardship affected their grades because the divorce, I guess, was very difficult. And it changed this person a lot. So I would say I would need to know more about what else is possible for you, Maria. That's the name I'm seeing here. I need to know what else is possible for you to be able to determine whether this topic versus another is correct. You definitely want to talk about this in your essay in your application, because it affected your grades. Anything that affects the grades that the admissions office can really see, there's like this dip in grades somewhere in the transcript, you definitely want to share something about that in your application. Sometimes the essay is the best place, because like this student is sharing with me, they had a personality change because of this. And so I would say to you that go ahead and write a draft where you discuss this challenge. But like I said earlier, don't focus on the hardship. Focus more on this new person, this resurrected you, this transformed personality that has resulted from this experience, and what this new person can do, what strengths, newfound strengths you gained, what do those make possible? What do you do with them? That would make, I would say, the bulk of the essay. So it's more like the hardship is a given circumstance, not really the core of the story that you're telling. The core is this new person that is thriving since. And yeah, write a draft, see what you think. Don't worry about it being super polished yet. Just give it a go. See what you think. And if you don't use this topic in the essay, which is also fine, you want to use the space called additional information to share what happened, or you can have one of your school recommenders. Really, actually, it should be your school counselor who writes the cover letter for your application. I go over all of this in the webinar I'm giving in 2 weeks, which is about the rest of the application. But there's a section where you can write about hardships in the Common App, and in the UC application. It's not one of the PIQs. They both have a section for hardships. And you can also ask the counselor for the Common App cover letter to talk about it if you don't want to talk about it yourself. That's also great. Okay, so then the next question I see here, how would I go about an essay about a sport you never gave up on without making it sound cliche, like a more individual sport? So sports essays are tricky. Thank you for this question. It's not a topic I've actually brought up a whole lot yet in my webinar that lists of topics to avoid. So the thing about sports is when you're applying to college, 95% of the applicants, 98% of the applicants are not applying to be an athlete. You're applying to be a student. And so writing essays about sports doesn't actually help, usually doesn't actually help the admissions officer see the applicant as a student. It's weird. It may sound a little strange. So it doesn't mean a sports essay is off, is in the red zone, is off limits. Because I've definitely helped students write about their sport in a way that has been very successful. I would say look for the stories within the sport that are not about gameplay, that are not about sports practice or developing yourself as an athlete, but things around the sport that might really stand out. Teaching the sport to young people and sharing the passion that you have for it through teaching and discovering your leadership through teaching might be a way to talk about the sport in a fresh way. Or to do a patchwork structure where you might be preparing to go to a game or preparing to go to a training in your unique sport. And that preparation is like a ritual that you use as a framing device to travel to different parts of your life and talk about all of you. Again, a favorite place might be that field or that arena or that, training court where you're doing that sport. And so that could be a really cool location for a patchwork essay. Definitely had students use all kinds of interesting sports locations. I had one student who was a big rower getting into Georgetown, writing an essay about cleaning the boathouse and what he did to clean the boathouse and the music he put on and the stories that came to him as he looked at all the different boats. And the stories were not about his team necessarily or about the sport of rowing. It was about his life. The trash he found on the ground, it all helped him get to himself. It was sort of like a treasure chest. The boathouse was like a treasure chest of stuff that he used to talk about himself. So those are some examples of how to write about your sport without getting cliche. In general, with cliche, I will also add that the more specific you are, the less room there is for a cliche. Cliche is usually happening for the reader because things are just too familiar and not specific enough. So the best way around it is just to get more specific. All right, folks. Well, I have gone over time. Thank you for everyone who stuck around. Again, if you want to ask me a question, go ahead, email me at justin@wowcollegeconsulting.com. You can even text me at my number you see on the screen. 929-244-9719. I'm happy to answer your questions, get you going on your essays, make sure that you can get into the schools you really, really want. And next week, not next week, in 2 weeks, I'm doing again, a webinar based on the supplements and other sides of the application. So look out for that. Oh, someone wrote to me just now, how would writing about learning to do CPR and teaching it to the cops sound? That sounds really unique. And especially if you're going to go into pre-med, that might be interesting. But I definitely could see that standing out. Especially teaching to police. That's not someone else. That's not going to be someone else's story. So I think that's pretty cool. Anyway, jump into my text messaging, jump into my email, get a hold of me that way. Thank you all so much for your attention. I want to read what you're doing, stay in touch with me, and have a great admissions. See you in 2 weeks at How to Write Supplements That Wow. Okay, see ya. Take care.